The Galactic Empire's fleet appeared in Earth's orbit like a dark cloud blotting out the stars. Alien commanders aboard the flagship stared at the blue planet below, smugness dripping from their every word. Earth, to them, was nothing more than an insignificant backwater, barely worth their attention. "This will be quick," sneered Commander Rowleth, his voice laced with arrogance. "Prepare the first wave. Let's show these primitives the power of the Empire." Across the planet, news of the invasion spread like wildfire. Fear rippled through cities and towns as broadcasts showed the massive alien ships hanging ominously in the sky. People panicked, governments scrambled, and social media exploded with speculation and dread. But amidst the chaos, Earth's leaders remained eerily calm, as if they'd been waiting for this moment all along. In an underground bunker beneath Washington, D.C., the President of the United States stood with key global leaders, their expressions stoic. "It's time," the President said quietly. "Activate Project Achilles." With a series of encrypted commands, the order was relayed. Around the world, hidden installations came online. Earth's greatest secret, kept hidden for decades, was about to be unleashed. While the public trembled in fear, those in power knew something the Empire did not. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for generations. As the first wave of alien fighters descended toward Earth, a strange calm settled over the planet's military forces. Soldiers and generals, who moments ago had been bracing for an overwhelming attack, now stood ready with a quiet confidence that puzzled the invading forces. Alien commanders scanned the planet's surface, expecting signs of a frantic defense or mass evacuations, but instead, they found silence, an eerie, unnatural silence. "Why aren't they responding?" one of the Empire's tactical officers asked, his voice betraying the first hint of unease. "Perhaps they've already accepted defeat," Rowleth replied with a smirk. "Primitive creatures often freeze when faced with superior technology." But what the Empire mistook for submission was, in fact, the first stage of psychological warfare. Earth's leaders had deliberately withheld their full capabilities, choosing to lull the invaders into a false sense of security. And it was working. As the alien fighters entered the atmosphere, expecting to land unopposed, their systems began to glitch. Small disturbances at first, flickers on their sensors, momentary losses of communication, but soon, those disturbances grew into chaos. Ships that had been in perfect formation suddenly found themselves veering off course, their navigation systems scrambled by forces they couldn't detect. "Status report!" Rowleth barked, watching as his once flawless assault plan unraveled before his eyes. "Sir, we're experiencing massive interference. Our systems are failing. Communication with the first wave is lost," the officer shouted in panic. Rowleth's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. These humans don't have the technology to disrupt our systems." But he was wrong. Unbeknownst to the Empire, Earth had developed a quantum defense network, one that could manipulate space-time itself. And now, it was fully operational. Invisible to the naked eye, a shield had been erected around the planet, bending reality in ways the alien technology couldn't comprehend. The first wave of fighters, caught in the temporal distortions, began to disintegrate mid-air. The invaders, still believing they held the upper hand, were being systematically wiped out before they could even engage their enemies. On the ground, military personnel watched the destruction of the alien fleet in stunned silence. There were no battles to fight, no orders to give. Earth's defenses were operating on an entirely different level, one that even its own people barely understood. Inside the command bunker, the President glanced at the holographic display showing the enemy fleet breaking apart in real time. A faint smile crossed his lips. "Phase 1 complete," he said, turning to the room of generals and scientists. "Now, let's show them what humanity is really capable of." As the alien fleet reeled from the sudden collapse of their first wave, Rowleth's fury boiled over. He slammed his fist against the control panel. "Launch the second wave. Full force. No more games," he snarled. The second wave of ships, larger and more heavily armed, surged forward from the orbiting fleet. This time, they would not rely on fighters. This time, they would bombard the surface with overwhelming firepower. The Empire would reduce Earth to ashes if it refused to submit. But as the massive warships prepared to fire, something extraordinary happened. The sky itself seemed to shimmer, and within seconds, the alien warships found their energy weapons rendered useless. Beams of light intended to devastate entire cities fizzled out before they could even touch the ground. Alien engineers scrambled to figure out what had gone wrong, but there was no malfunction, just Earth's defenses working flawlessly. Rowlett stared at the sight in disbelief. The great armada of the Galactic Empire, the most feared military force in the galaxy, was being undone by an enemy they hadn't even considered worthy of preparation. "Impossible," he whispered, watching as Earth's forces, still hidden from view, decimated his fleet without ever firing a visible shot. In a matter of minutes, what had been hailed as the Empire's greatest conquest had turned into its most humiliating defeat. Ships exploded in silent flashes, disintegrating as they entered the range of Earth's quantum defenses. No invader that set foot in Earth's atmosphere survived to tell the tale. Rowlett's confidence evaporated, replaced with cold dread. This was not the easy victory he had promised his superiors. Earth was no primitive world. It was a death trap, one that the Galactic Empire had foolishly walked straight into. And the worst part was, they hadn't even seen humanity's real power yet. The second wave was obliterated as easily as the first. The once mighty warships that had never known defeat were now nothing more than wreckage falling toward Earth. Panic began to spread among the Empire's fleet. Rowlett's command deck was in chaos, officers shouting, alarms blaring, and screens flashing with incomprehensible data. Rowlett gritted his teeth, his mind racing. He couldn't understand how it was happening. Earth was supposed to be a primitive, unprepared planet, yet their defenses had rendered his fleet powerless. His pride kept him from accepting the truth, that he had underestimated humanity. But the signs were becoming undeniable. "Commander, our weapons are useless. The second wave has been completely neutralized," an officer stammered, barely able to believe the words coming out of his own mouth. Rowlett clenched his fists, unwilling to show fear. "It doesn't matter. We have the numbers. Send reinforcements from the outer fleets. Deploy everything we have." His words were filled with bravado, but deep down, doubt began to creep in. The Empire had never faced anything like this. Their overwhelming technological superiority had always been enough, but now, that very advantage seemed meaningless. As the reinforcements arrived, thousands of additional ships from the outer territories, the Empire's hope of victory was rekindled. They believed sheer numbers could overwhelm Earth's defenses, that eventually, the humans would falter. The Empire's ships spread out, surrounding the planet, poised to launch an all-out assault. But Earth had prepared for this too. While the Empire focused on brute force, humanity had focused on intelligence. The AI systems controlling Earth's defense network were far more advanced than the invaders could comprehend. The system, created through years of development in the shadows, could analyze billions of variables in real time, predicting and countering every strategy the Empire's forces tried to implement. As the Empire's ships moved into formation, the AI ran its calculations. Within moments, it had mapped out the entire invasion strategy, pinpointing weaknesses in the fleet's positioning, coordination, and communication systems. The response was immediate and devastating. Earth didn't fire massive, destructive weapons in the way the Empire expected. Instead, it used precision tactics, disabling key ships with surgical strikes that left the rest of the fleet in disarray. Satellites, drones, and automated defense platforms, all linked to the AI, launched their attacks with unerring accuracy. Alien ships that had never known defeat began to fall one by one, not in fiery explosions but in controlled, calculated strikes that left them drifting helplessly in space. Their systems were hacked, their engines shut down, their communications jammed. Some of the Empire's ships even turned against each other, their command signals hijacked by Earth's AI. "What is happening?" Rowlett demanded, his voice rising in panic. "How are they doing this?" His officers had no answers. The Empire had never been on the receiving end of such tactical brilliance. They had never faced an enemy who could outthink them at every turn. From his position in orbit, Rowlett watched in horror as the battle unfolded. Earth was not responding with overwhelming firepower, but with overwhelming precision. Each move the Empire made was anticipated and countered before it could even begin. It was as if the humans knew every thought in their minds before they could act on it. "Sir, the reinforcements are being neutralized. We're losing ships faster than we can deploy them," another officer shouted, fear now clear in his voice. Rowlett's facade of control began to crack. His fleet, the pride of the Galactic Empire, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy he had dismissed as primitive. Every order he gave was countered almost before it was spoken. No matter how many ships he deployed, no matter what strategies he attempted, the result was the same: complete and utter failure. The AI running Earth's defense network was more than just a tool. It was a weapon of pure intellect, capable of outmaneuvering the Empire's most advanced technology. While the invaders relied on brute strength and sheer numbers, Earth had evolved beyond such crude methods of warfare. Their secret weapon was not just their technology. It was their ability to think faster, smarter, and further ahead than any of their enemies. For the first time in his career, Rowlett felt a true sense of hopelessness. The Empire's fleets were not just being defeated, they were being humiliated. The realization that they were no longer in control of the battle, of the war, of their own fate, began to sink in. "Commander, what do we do?" one of his officers asked, eyes wide with panic. Rowlett had no answer. Everything he had been taught, every strategy he had ever used, was useless here. The Empire's doctrine of overwhelming force had crumbled in the face of an enemy who fought with intelligence instead of power. In the depths of space, far from the battle, the Empire's high command watched in stunned silence. They had expected a swift and easy victory, but instead, they were witnessing the total destruction of their finest fleets. Earth, the planet they had mocked and dismissed, had turned their greatest strengths into weaknesses. Back on Earth, the human commanders overseeing the defense remained calm, their confidence growing as each wave of invaders was destroyed. They knew the truth: the Galactic Empire had walked into a trap, one that had been set long ago. Earth had never been a defenseless planet. It had simply played the part, waiting for the right moment to strike. The final phase of the defense was about to begin, and the Galactic Empire was about to learn, too late, just how wrong they had been. Rowlett stared blankly at the devastation unfolding in front of him. His once proud fleet, the Empire's most formidable armada, was reduced to smoldering wrecks and disabled ships, littering the void. The hum of desperate activity surrounded him, officers scrambling, shouting over each other, but he felt a growing numbness creep into his core. How had it come to this? How had Earth, a planet they believed inferior, utterly annihilated them? There were no more answers, only survival instincts kicking in. "Commander, we're losing control of our remaining forces," a panicked officer reported, though the words barely registered in Rowlett's mind. The situation had spiraled beyond his control. His tactical brain, honed through decades of military experience, was at a loss. Every protocol he had relied on, every strategy he had mastered, crumbled under the weight of Earth's relentless precision. But there was no time for reflection. They were still in the fight barely. "Order a retreat. Regroup at Sector 12. We'll recalibrate our approach there," Rowlett said, the words feeling hollow even as he gave the command. The officer hesitated for a second, unsure if the retreat was truly an option or just a stall for inevitable defeat. But orders were orders. As the remnants of the Empire's forces began their retreat, another wave of Earth's response hit them. It wasn't more weapons fire, no devastating barrage. Instead, the Empire's ships began to experience complete systems failure. Lights flickered out, control panels blinked off, and engines sputtered to a halt. Ships went dark. The realization sank in slowly: Earth wasn't just outgunning them, they were taking control. A subtle but terrifying shift had occurred. Earth wasn't merely defending itself, it was dominating the entire battlefield with precision unlike anything the Empire had seen. Rowlett slammed his fist onto the command table. "What is happening to our systems?" he shouted. His fury was only matched by the despair creeping into his voice. Sir, it's their AI. They're overriding our commands, seizing control of our fleet remotely. The officer spoke quietly, as if unwilling to acknowledge the truth. For the first time in his life, Rowlett was facing an enemy who fought in ways beyond the conventional, beyond the limits of brute strength and numbers. The humans had crafted a war where the mind, not the weapon, dictated victory. And Earth's defense AI was more than capable of thinking circles around them. Across the crippled fleet, alien ships floundered as they were cut off from their own command centers. Communications were disrupted, navigation systems scrambled, and weapons rendered useless. Earth had turned the battlefield into a playground of chaos, leaving the Empire's ships to drift helplessly. And then came the final blow. Earth's AI, fully in control, began to exploit the Empire's own technology against them. Alien warships that once stood as monuments to their superiority suddenly turned on each other. Automated systems were hacked, reprogrammed to fire upon friendly ships. Weapons that had been designed to conquer worlds were now being used to dismantle their own forces. Rowlett watched in disbelief as ships from his fleet launched volleys at one another, tearing apart what little hope remained. His own command ship trembled as the once loyal vessels closed in, targeting him as if he were the enemy. "Cut the systems! Shut everything down!" he screamed, but it was too late. Earth's AI had complete control. On Earth, the humans had barely lifted a finger since the battle had begun. They simply let their machines do the work. The AI, which had been designed with layers of complex algorithms and centuries of combat simulation, was executing its plan flawlessly. It didn't just defeat the Empire's fleet, it dismantled it piece by piece, from within. The retreat had become a massacre. The Galactic Empire's finest soldiers, its elite officers, were caught in the crossfire of their own weapons, powerless to stop it. Panic turned into despair, despair into helplessness. "Sir, we're being targeted by our own fleet," an officer whispered, the last shred of hope draining from his face. Rowlett's silence said everything. They had been outwitted, outmaneuvered, outclassed. His fleet, his legacy, was being torn apart not by brute force but by superior strategy. "Commander, permission to evacuate?" the officer asked, though the answer was already clear in his eyes. The command ship was one of the last functioning vessels, and even it would soon be targeted. There was no escape. Rowlett's mind raced, searching for an option, a way to salvage anything from this catastrophe. But there was nothing. No secret plan, no hidden reinforcements. Just a cold, hard realization. The Empire had lost. And not just this battle, but something far greater. Their illusion of invincibility had been shattered, their reputation obliterated. "Send the signal," Rowlett finally said, his voice hollow, devoid of the confidence it once held. The officer hesitated for a moment. "The signal?" "To the High Command. Tell them Earth cannot be taken." As the officer moved to relay the message, Rowlett sat back in his chair, his mind replaying every tactical mistake, every moment of arrogance that had led them to this point. How had they so thoroughly underestimated humanity? Outside the ship, the last remnants of the Galactic fleet continued their futile struggle, firing blindly at anything they could. But Earth's forces, calm, methodical, were already preparing for the final phase. In the command ship, Rowlett braced himself for the inevitable as alarms blared and screens displayed his doom. Earth had outfought them, and now, with a final, calculated strike, they would obliterate them. And with it, the Galactic Empire's pride. The Galactic Empire's capital world, Nervier, sat in a state of disbelief. Word of the catastrophic failure had spread like wildfire through the Imperial halls. High Command, once confident in the Empire's invincibility, now faced an undeniable truth: they had underestimated Earth, and the consequences were devastating. The transmission from Rowlett had come through clearly. His final message was a warning, a desperate plea for caution. "Earth cannot be taken." The words reverberated through the chamber, repeated in hushed tones by the council members, each struggling to grasp the magnitude of the defeat. At the head of the chamber, the Emperor's expression remained cold, unreadable. He had ruled the Empire for centuries, expanding its borders, crushing rebellions, and assimilating countless worlds. Yet now, for the first time, an enemy had not only resisted but annihilated his most powerful fleet in a matter of moments. The Empire's dominance had never been questioned, until now. The Council was silent, afraid to speak out of turn. It was an unprecedented situation. The Empire had conquered countless systems, subdued species with advanced technology, and brought civilizations to their knees. But Earth? Earth had torn through the might of the Galactic Armada with terrifying ease, leaving the Empire's greatest military force in shambles. None of the Council members could comprehend it, but the evidence was clear. An advisor finally broke the silence. Your Majesty, this defeat will ripple across the galaxy. Our enemies will see this as weakness. There will be uprisings. Already, reports from the Outer Rim suggest several insurgent factions have begun mobilizing. If we do not act quickly, the Empire's stability could be. The Emperor raised a hand, silencing the advisor. His gaze was fixed on the holographic display in front of him, showing Earth's position in the galactic map. So small, so seemingly insignificant, yet it had delivered the greatest blow the Empire had ever suffered. His thoughts were not on the insurrections, not on the political repercussions, but on the deeper, more profound implications of this failure. How did they do it? The Emperor asked quietly, his voice devoid of the usual force it carried. His advisors exchanged nervous glances. None of them had answers. Earth's technologies, their methods, everything was a mystery. The Empire had encountered countless adversaries, yet none had wielded such precise, devastating power. The human race had outwitted them at every turn, breaking the very logic of war. A scientist, one of the Empire's foremost experts in warfare technology, stepped forward cautiously. Your Majesty, we've analyzed the data from the remnants of the fleet. Earth appears to have developed a hybrid system of quantum-based defenses and AI-driven warfare. Their ability to manipulate space-time around their planet, it's beyond anything we've seen. They didn't just fight us. They rendered our weapons obsolete. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Obsolete? Yes, Your Majesty. The scientist continued. Their quantum field absorbed and neutralized our attacks. Even our most advanced weapons were rendered ineffective. Additionally, their AI seems to have adapted in real time, predicting our every move. The result was total domination of the battlefield. The chamber fell silent again as the weight of the scientist's words sank in. The Empire, with all its vast resources, all its technological superiority, had been outmatched by a single planet. A backwater, as they had once believed. The Emperor's expression darkened. Send a message to all our fleets, he ordered. They are to hold their positions. No further engagements with Earth. We will regroup, reconsider our strategy. An advisor stepped forward, his voice hesitant. And the message to Earth, Your Majesty? Will there be retaliation? The Emperor considered the question carefully. Retaliation? Against an enemy that had demonstrated such overwhelming superiority? It would be suicide. And yet, to not retaliate, to not show strength, would be to admit defeat. His grip on the Empire, on its colonies, would weaken. But this was not an ordinary enemy. Earth had proven itself far more dangerous than he could have imagined. The humans had wielded their intellect, their resourcefulness, in ways that defied expectation. They had mastered war in a way the Empire had not anticipated, and any further attempt to subdue them would only result in more humiliation. No, the Emperor said finally, his voice low but firm. There will be no retaliation. Send a diplomatic envoy to Earth. We will open negotiations. The Council erupted into whispers. Diplomacy? With a planet that had just wiped out their fleet? It was unthinkable. The Empire did not negotiate with lesser species, they conquered. But the Emperor had made up his mind. He could not afford another defeat. If they could not conquer Earth, they would find another way to neutralize the threat. Your Majesty, an older advisor spoke, his voice steady. The galaxy will not view this lightly. If we do not respond with force, Our allies and enemies alike will see this as a sign of weakness. The Emperor met his advisor's gaze coldly. They will see what I tell them to see. The Empire does not act rashly. We will rearm, and ensure that Earth is not underestimated again. But for now, we must tread carefully. As the chamber began to clear, the Emperor remained in his seat, staring at the holographic map. Earth. A single planet had done what no other power in the galaxy had managed. They had shattered the Empire's aura of invincibility, and the Emperor knew that the galaxy would never be the same. But this was far from over. Earth had won the battle, yes. But the Emperor had no intention of letting this defeat stand as the final chapter. He would regroup, learn from their mistakes, and when the time came, the Empire would strike again, on their terms. For now, however, Earth had earned a reprieve. But the Emperor vowed, deep within his cold heart, that this would not be the last they heard of the Galactic Empire. It was merely the beginning. The humans had shown their hand, revealed their strength. But the Empire had centuries of warfare behind them. And they would adapt, just as their enemy had. For now, they would retreat, lick their wounds, and prepare. But in the end, the Empire would find a way to conquer Earth. Even if it took years, or decades, they would ensure that the balance of power was restored. Victory had been Earth's for now. But the Emperor promised silently that the final war was yet to come.